Picture a quiet girl who never spoke above a whisper, her worn water bottle her only constant companion through the harsh corridors of high school. When cruel bullies decided to humiliate her by destroying something so simple yet precious, they had no idea they were about to awaken a storm they couldn't weather. In less than 48 hours, these same tormentors would be on their knees, begging for forgiveness from someone they never saw coming. This incredible story of hidden strength, martial arts mastery, and jaw-dropping justice will leave you speechless from beginning to end. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Maya Chen had perfected the art of being unremarkable. At 16, she moved through the hallways of Riverside High School like smoke, present but never truly seen. Her small frame seemed to shrink even further beneath oversized sweaters, and her straight black hair fell like a curtain across her face, creating a barrier between herself and the world that had never quite accepted her. She was the girl who sat in the back corner of every classroom, who ate lunch alone under the old oak tree in the courtyard, and who had never once raised her hand to answer a question despite knowing most of the answers before the teacher finished asking. In the sprawling suburb of Millbrook, California, where perfect lawns and perfect families seemed to be the standard, Maya's quiet existence was both a shield and a prison. She had learned early that invisibility was safer than attention, that silence was better than the risk of saying something wrong. Her parents, both hard-working immigrants who ran a small restaurant downtown, had always emphasized the importance of keeping her head down and focusing on her studies. They meant well, but their advice had shaped Maya into someone who believed she was meant to observe life rather than participate in it. The only thing that truly belonged to Maya was her water bottle. It wasn't expensive or particularly attractive, just a simple stainless steel bottle with a faded floral pattern that her grandmother had given her 3 years ago before passing away. The bottle had been her grandmother's during her own youth in Taiwan, and it carried with it stories of resilience and quiet strength that Maya's grandmother had shared during their last summer together. Every morning, Maya would carefully fill it with water and a few drops of the jasmine tea her grandmother had taught her to make, creating a ritual that connected her to something larger than the suffocating walls of high school. Maya carried that bottle everywhere. It sat on her desk during classes, accompanied her to the library where she spent most of her free time, and rested beside her during the solitary lunches that had become her routine. To anyone else it was just a water bottle, but to Maya, it was a tangible link to the woman who had been the only person to truly see her, to encourage her dreams, and to whisper stories of warriors and fighters who had found strength in the most unexpected places. What none of her classmates knew, what the teachers who barely noticed her couldn't imagine, was that Maya Chen was far from helpless. 3 times a week, after school ended and the buses had departed, Maya would take the city bus to Master Kim's Taekwondo Academy on the other side of town. For the past 6 years, she had been training in the ancient Korean martial art, developing skills that would have shocked anyone who knew her only as the quiet girl who never spoke up. Master Kim, a 70-year-old man with kind eyes and calloused hands, had been her grandmother's friend and had agreed to train Maya when she was just 10 years old. He had seen something in the shy child that others missed, a fire that burned quietly but intensely, a determination that could be shaped into something powerful with the right guidance. Under his patient instruction, Maya had learned not just the physical techniques of Taekwondo, but the philosophy behind it, the discipline, the respect, the understanding that true strength came from within and should only be used when absolutely necessary. Maya had earned her black belt 2 years ago, but she had never told anyone at school. The confidence she displayed in the dojang, the fierce determination that showed in her eyes when she practiced her forms, seemed to evaporate the moment she stepped back into the halls of Riverside High. It was as if she lived 2 completely different lives, one where she was capable and strong, and another where she was invisible and insignificant. The duality of her existence had become so natural that Maya sometimes forgot which version of herself was real. When she was at Master Kim's academy, breaking boards with powerful kicks and sparring with students twice her size, she felt alive and purposeful. But when she walked through the school doors each morning, that version of herself seemed like a distant dream, something that belonged to someone else entirely. Maya's daily routine was as predictable as clockwork. She would arrive at school exactly 15 minutes before the first bell, slip into her seat in homeroom without making eye contact with anyone, and navigate through her classes with the practiced ease of someone who had memorized every route that would attract the least attention. She knew which stairwells were less crowded, which bathrooms were usually empty, and exactly where to sit in the cafeteria to avoid the notice of the groups that ruled the school's social hierarchy. The students who commanded attention at Riverside High were as different from Maya as night from day. There was Brandon Mitchell, the quarterback of the football team whose charm and athletic ability had made him the unofficial king of the school. Tall and broad-shouldered, with sandy brown hair and a smile that could disarm teachers and parents alike, Brandon had the kind of natural charisma that drew people to him like moths to a flame. He was the boy that other boys wanted to be friends with and girls dreamed of dating, and he seemed to glide through life with an ease that Maya could only wonder at. Then there was Sophia Martinez, whose beauty and confidence made her the undisputed queen of Riverside High's social scene. With her long, perfectly styled dark hair and an innate sense of fashion that made even the school uniform look like it belonged on a runway, Sophia commanded attention wherever she went. She was the girl who organized the school dances, who dated the most popular boys, and who seemed to have been born knowing exactly how to navigate the complex social dynamics that left Maya feeling lost and confused. Jake Thompson was Brandon's best friend and the star of the wrestling team. Built like a tank with arms that seemed designed for intimidation, Jake had a reputation for being quick to anger and slow to forgive. His loyalty to Brandon was absolute, and he had appointed himself as the enforcer of their group's unspoken rules. Where Brandon led with charm, Jake followed with strength, and together they formed a partnership that had dominated the school's social structure for years. Finally, there was Emma Walsh, Sophia's closest friend and the school's most accomplished gossip. With her sharp wit and sharper tongue, Emma had an uncanny ability to know everyone's secrets and a complete lack of hesitation when it came to sharing them. She was the girl who could make or break reputations with a single, well-placed rumor, and she wielded that power with the casual cruelty of someone who had never been on the receiving end of such treatment. These 4 students moved through Riverside High like they owned it, and in many ways they did. They were the ones who decided which parties were worth attending, which trends were worth following, and which students were worth acknowledging. They existed in a bubble of privilege and popularity that seemed completely separate from the world that Maya inhabited, and for 3 years, their paths had rarely crossed. Maya preferred it that way. She had watched from the shadows as these 4 had left a trail of broken spirits and damaged reputations in their wake. She had seen them reduce confident students to tears with casual cruelty, watched them turn minor embarrassments into major social disasters, and witnessed their complete inability to understand that their actions had consequences for people who weren't protected by their status and popularity. The cafeteria at Riverside High was a microcosm of the school's social structure, with invisible but clearly defined territories that everyone understood but no one discussed. The popular kids claimed the tables near the windows, where natural light made them look even more attractive and where they could see and be seen by everyone who entered. The athletes had their own section near the food line, where they could hold court and discuss their latest victories. The drama kids clustered around tables near the stage, where they could practice their lines and plan their next production. Maya's territory was a small table in the far corner, partially hidden by a pillar and close enough to the library doors that she could make a quick escape if necessary. It was here that she sat every day, eating the lunch her mother had packed for her while reading whatever book had captured her attention that week. The routine was comforting in its predictability, and Maya had come to think of that corner table as her own personal sanctuary within the chaos of the school day. Her water bottle always sat to her right, within easy reach and positioned so that she could see her grandmother's faded floral pattern even when she was focused on her book. Sometimes she would run her fingers over the smooth metal surface, remembering the stories her grandmother had told her about the bottle's journey from Taiwan to California, about the hands that had held it before hers, and about the strength that could be found in the most ordinary objects. Maya's academic performance was exemplary, though she took great care to ensure that her grades never attracted too much attention. She was the student who consistently earned A's but never volunteered to read her essays aloud, who solved complex math problems correctly but never showed her work on the board, and who understood the material better than most of her classmates but never participated in class discussions. Her teachers appreciated her consistency and her quiet respect, but they saw her as a model student rather than a remarkable one. The truth was that Maya's intelligence was as carefully hidden as her martial arts training. She had learned to dim her light not because she lacked confidence in her abilities, but because she had observed what happened to students who stood out too much. She had seen brilliant kids become targets for jealousy and ridicule, watched as academic success became a source of social isolation, and understood that sometimes the smartest thing you could do was appear average. This careful balancing act had served Maya well for 3 years. She had managed to graduate from middle school and navigate the first half of high school without attracting negative attention, without making enemies, and without experiencing the kind of bullying that seemed to be an inevitable part of adolescence for many of her peers. She had convinced herself that invisibility was not just a survival strategy but a way of life, and that as long as she kept her head down and avoided conflict, she could make it through high school unscathed. But Maya's carefully constructed world was built on a foundation that was more fragile than she realized. Her invisibility had protected her from casual cruelty, but it had also isolated her from the kind of connections that might have offered support when she needed it most. She had no close friends to confide in, no allies to stand with her, and no reputation for strength that might have deterred potential aggressors. She had made herself so small and unremarkable that she had become the perfect target for someone looking to assert their power over a victim who couldn't fight back. The autumn of Maya's junior year had been particularly challenging. The pressure of advanced placement classes, the looming stress of college applications, and the increasing intensity of her Taekwondo training had left her feeling more isolated than ever. She found herself spending even more time alone, even more committed to her routine of invisibility, and even more convinced that her only option was to endure until graduation offered her an escape from the suffocating environment of high school. She had no way of knowing that her carefully maintained anonymity was about to be shattered, that the very qualities that had protected her for so long were about to make her a target for cruelty she couldn't avoid. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She couldn't have predicted that her most precious possession would become the catalyst for a confrontation that would change not just her own life, but the entire dynamic of power and fear that ruled Riverside High. Master Kim had been teaching Maya about the concept of indomitable spirit during their recent training sessions. He had explained that true strength wasn't about the ability to dominate others, but about the courage to stand up for what was right, even when you were afraid. He had told her stories of ancient warriors who had found their greatest victories not in conquest, but in the defense of those who couldn't defend themselves. Maya had listened to these lessons with the same quiet attention she brought to everything else in her life, but she had never imagined that she would soon be called upon to embody the principles Master Kim had been teaching her. She had always thought of her Taekwondo training as something separate from her school life, a private source of strength that she could draw upon for confidence but never for action. The morning that would change everything began like any other. Maya woke up at 6 o'clock, helped her parents prepare for the early rush at their restaurant, and filled her grandmother's water bottle with the jasmine tea that had become their shared ritual. She caught the bus to school at exactly 7:30, took her usual seat in the back where she could watch the world go by without being noticed, and arrived at Riverside High with 15 minutes to spare before the first bell. The October air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of the changing season. Maya pulled her sweater tighter around her shoulders as she walked through the main entrance, her backpack slung over one shoulder and her water bottle clutched in her hand. She nodded politely to the security guard who barely glanced up from his morning coffee, navigated through the crowded hallway with practiced ease, and made her way to her first class of the day. Chemistry had always been one of Maya's favorite subjects. There was something comforting about the predictability of formulas and reactions, the way elements combined in precise ratios to create something entirely new. She enjoyed the logic of it, the way every experiment followed rules that could be understood and predicted if you took the time to learn them properly. It was during chemistry class that Maya felt most like herself, competent, curious, and engaged with the world around her. Mr. Peterson, the chemistry teacher, was one of the few faculty members who had taken notice of Maya's quiet brilliance. He had tried on several occasions to encourage her to participate more actively in class discussions, to consider joining the science club, and to think about pursuing chemistry in college. Maya appreciated his attention, but she had always deflected his suggestions with polite excuses and grateful smiles that hid her deeper fears about stepping into the spotlight. Today's lesson was about chemical bonds and the way different elements created stronger structures when they were combined properly. Mr. Peterson explained how individual atoms, weak on their own, could form molecules that were far more stable and powerful than their separate components. Maya found herself thinking about the parallel to her own life, how she had spent so long focusing on her individual survival that she had never considered what she might be capable of if she found a way to connect with others. After chemistry, Maya made her way to English literature, where they were studying To Kill a Mockingbird and discussing themes of courage and moral responsibility. Mrs. Rodriguez, the English teacher, had been trying to get Maya to share her insights about the novel, clearly recognizing that the quiet girl in the back corner had thoughts worth hearing. Maya had written a particularly thoughtful essay about Atticus Finch's decision to defend Tom Robinson, despite the social consequences. But she had declined Mrs. Rodriguez's invitation to read it aloud to the class. The morning passed in its usual pattern of quiet attention and careful avoidance of notice. Maya took notes with the same meticulous care she brought to everything else, absorbed the information with the thoroughness of someone who genuinely loved learning, and managed to blend into the background while still excelling academically. Her water bottle sat on her desk throughout each class, a constant reminder of her grandmother's strength and the stories of resilience that had shaped her understanding of what it meant to be strong. By the time lunch period arrived, Maya was feeling the familiar mix of relief and loneliness that came with being alone in a crowded place. She collected her lunch from her locker, made her way to the cafeteria, and headed toward her usual table in the corner. The cafeteria was bustling with its typical energy, students clustering around tables with their chosen groups, conversations flowing across the room, and the underlying tension that always seemed to exist when hundreds of teenagers were gathered in one place. Maya had just settled into her seat and opened her book when she noticed that something felt different. There was a particular quality to the energy in the room that she had learned to recognize over the years, a sharpening of attention that usually preceded some kind of drama or conflict. She glanced up from her book to see Brandon Mitchell and his group making their way through the cafeteria, their movements purposeful in a way that suggested they were looking for something specific. Maya quickly looked back down at her book, hoping that whatever had caught their attention would remain far from her corner of the room. She had managed to avoid any direct interaction with the popular crowd throughout her time at Riverside High, and she had no desire to change that pattern now. She took a sip from her water bottle, tasting the familiar comfort of jasmine tea, and tried to focus on the words on the page in front of her. But sometimes, no matter how small you make yourself, no matter how carefully you avoid attention, the world decides to notice you anyway. Maya was about to learn that invisibility, like all forms of protection, was ultimately fragile, and that the moment when you most need to be unseen is often the moment when you become impossible to ignore. The sound of footsteps approaching her table made Maya's heart rate quicken, but she kept her eyes fixed on her book, hoping that whoever was walking by would simply continue on their way. She had perfected the art of appearing completely absorbed in whatever she was reading, and she employed that skill now with desperate intensity. "Hey, look what we have here!" Brandon's voice cut through the ambient noise of the cafeteria, and Maya felt her stomach drop. She didn't look up, didn't acknowledge that she had heard him, but she could feel the weight of multiple gazes settling on her like a physical presence. "I don't think I've ever seen her without that water bottle," Sophia's voice added, and Maya could hear the cruel amusement that had crept into her tone. "It's like she's attached to it or something." Maya's grip tightened on her book, her knuckles white with tension. She could feel the attention of nearby students beginning to shift toward her table, drawn by the magnetic pull of potential drama. This was exactly the kind of situation she had spent years trying to avoid, and she found herself frozen between the instinct to flee and the knowledge that running would only make things worse. "Maybe it's like a security blanket," Jake's voice rumbled, and Maya could hear the barely contained aggression that always seemed to lurk just beneath his surface. "Like a little kid who can't go anywhere without their teddy bear." Emma's laugh was sharp and cutting. "Oh my God, that's exactly what it is. She's like a little kid who never grew up. I bet she probably talks to it when she's alone." The conversation was happening around Maya as if she weren't there, as if she were an object to be discussed rather than a person with thoughts and feelings. She had experienced this kind of dehumanization before, but never so directly, never with the clear intent to humiliate and hurt. She could feel her face burning with embarrassment and anger, but she forced herself to remain still, to keep her breathing steady, to maintain the illusion that she was completely absorbed in her book. "I wonder what's so special about it," Brandon continued, and Maya could hear him moving closer to her table. "I mean, it's just a water bottle, right? Nothing that important." Maya's heart was pounding so hard that she was sure everyone in the cafeteria could hear it. She wanted to speak up, to defend herself, to explain that the bottle was a gift from her grandmother, and that it meant more to her than they could possibly understand. But the words stuck in her throat, trapped by years of conditioning that had taught her that speaking up would only make things worse. "Why don't we take a closer look?" Sophia suggested, and Maya could hear the predatory excitement in her voice. "I'm sure she won't mind sharing." Maya finally looked up from her book, her eyes meeting Sophia's for the first time in 3 years of attending the same school. What she saw there was a kind of casual cruelty that took her breath away. The look of someone who had never experienced powerlessness and who took genuine pleasure in exercising control over others. It was the look of a predator who had found prey that couldn't fight back. "Please," Maya whispered, the word escaping before she could stop it. "Please don't." Her voice was so quiet that it barely carried beyond their small circle, but it was enough to confirm what the group had suspected, that they had found someone who wouldn't fight back, someone who could be hurt without consequence, someone who would suffer in silence rather than risk making a scene. Brandon reached across the table and picked up Maya's water bottle, examining it with exaggerated interest. "Wow, this thing is really old, isn't it? Look at these scratches and dents. And what's this pattern? Flowers? How cute." Maya's hands were shaking as she watched him turn the bottle over in his hands, handling it with the casual disregard of someone who had never owned anything that couldn't be easily replaced. She wanted to reach out and take it back, to explain that it wasn't just a water bottle but a connection to someone she had loved and lost, but she found herself paralyzed by the weight of their attention and the fear of making the situation worse. "You know what I think?" Jake said, taking the bottle from Brandon's hands. "I think this thing is probably really unsanitary. I mean, look how old it is. There's probably all kinds of bacteria growing in there." Maya's voice was stronger this time, though it still trembled with emotion. "Please give it back. It was my grandmother's." Emma's eyes lit up with malicious interest. "Your grandmother's? Oh, that's even better. So it's like a family heirloom or something? A precious keepsake passed down through generations?" The mockery in her voice was unmistakable, and Maya felt something inside her begin to crack. She had endured years of invisibility, years of being ignored and overlooked, but this was different. This was personal. This was an attack on something that mattered to her, in a way that went beyond embarrassment or social status. "Actually," Sophia said, her voice taking on a tone of false concern, "I think Jake might be right about the bacteria thing. I mean, if this bottle is really that old, and if you've been using it every day for years, it's probably a health hazard. We should probably do something about that." Maya stood up from her seat, her book falling to the floor as she reached for her water bottle. "Please," she said again, her voice carrying a note of desperation that she had never heard before. "It's all I have left of her." But her words only seemed to encourage them. Brandon stepped between Maya and Jake, effectively blocking her from reaching the bottle. "Hey, we're just looking out for your health here. You should probably thank us." "Yeah," Jake added, unscrewing the cap and sniffing the contents. "This smells weird. What is this, some kind of tea? That's probably what's making you so antisocial. All these weird foreign chemicals." Maya felt something snap inside her at the casual racism in his comment, but she forced herself to remain calm. She had learned from Master Kim that anger without control was worse than useless. It was dangerous, both to yourself and to others. She took a deep breath, trying to center herself the way she had been taught, but the sight of her grandmother's bottle in Jake's careless hands made it almost impossible to maintain her composure. "I'm asking you nicely to give it back," Maya said, her voice steadier than she felt. "It doesn't belong to you." Emma laughed. "Oh, listen to that. She's asking nicely. How adorable. Maybe if you ask really, really nicely, we might consider it." The humiliation burned through Maya like acid. She could feel the eyes of other students watching the scene unfold, could hear the whispered conversations and stifled laughter that accompanied any public display of weakness. She had spent years avoiding exactly this kind of attention, And now she was trapped in the center of it with no way to escape, without losing something that meant more to her than her own dignity. Or maybe, Sophia said, her voice taking on a sing-song quality that made Maya's skin crawl, you could do something to earn it back. Like, I don't know, maybe you could tell us all about yourself. We hardly know anything about the mysterious Maya Chen. Maya's hands clenched into fists at her sides, and for a moment, she felt the familiar surge of power that came from years of martial arts training. She knew exactly how to take the bottle back, knew precisely which pressure points would make Jake release it instantly, knew how to end this confrontation in a matter of seconds. But she also knew that using her skills would only create bigger problems, would mark her as a threat instead of a victim, and would bring the kind of attention she had spent years trying to avoid. I don't want to talk about myself, Maya said quietly. I just want my bottle back. Jake held the bottle up higher, well out of Maya's reach. Well, too bad, because I think we're going to keep this for a while. You know, for your own good. To protect you from all those nasty bacteria. Maya felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had cried when her grandmother died, had cried when her family's restaurant nearly went bankrupt, had cried during the hardest moments of her Taekwondo training when she thought she wasn't strong enough to continue. But she would not cry here, in front of these people, over something they could never understand. What do you think, guys? Brandon asked, addressing his friends as if Maya weren't standing right there. Should we help Maya break her unhealthy attachment to this old bottle? The question hung in the air like a threat, and Maya realized with growing horror that this wasn't just about taking her bottle. It was about breaking her, about proving that they could take anything they wanted from anyone they chose. She had become their entertainment, their proof of power, their demonstration that some people mattered and others didn't. I think, Sophia said slowly, savoring each word, that Maya needs to learn that holding on to old things isn't healthy. Sometimes you have to let go of the past to move forward. Maya's voice was barely audible when she spoke. Please don't do this. You don't understand what it means to me. Oh, but we do understand, Emma said with mock sympathy. That's exactly the problem. You're way too attached to a piece of junk. It's not normal, Maya. It's not healthy. We're actually doing you a favor. Jake began to unscrew the cap completely, and Maya watched in horror as he prepared to pour out the jasmine tea that connected her to her grandmother's memory. The liquid caught the fluorescent lights of the cafeteria, and for a moment, Maya could see her grandmother's face reflected in the small pool of tea that had formed at the bottom of the bottle. Stop, Maya said, her voice carrying more authority than she had intended. Stop right now. But Jake only smiled. Or what? What are you going to do about it? Maya realized that she had reached a crossroads. She could continue to plead and beg, could submit to their cruelty and hope that they would eventually grow bored and move on to someone else. Or she could stand up for herself, could risk everything she had built by revealing the strength that she had kept hidden for so long. The choice was made for her when Jake tilted the bottle and began to pour the tea onto the floor. Maya watched the liquid that her grandmother had taught her to make spreading across the cafeteria tile, watched years of shared memories and quiet moments dissolving into nothing, and felt something inside her transform from fear into fury. I said, "Stop." The words came out with a force that surprised everyone, including Maya herself. The quiet girl who had never raised her voice, who had never challenged anyone, who had spent years making herself invisible, had suddenly become impossible to ignore. Jake paused, the bottle still in his hands, and looked at Maya with genuine surprise. "Excuse me, did you just give me an order?" Maya's eyes were blazing now, and she could feel the power that Master Kim had taught her to harness flowing through her body like electricity. "I'm telling you to stop. Give me back my bottle and walk away." The four students exchanged glances, and Maya could see that they had not expected this response. They had chosen her specifically because she seemed like someone who wouldn't fight back, someone who would endure their cruelty without resistance. The fact that she was standing up to them now was both shocking and, in a strange way, exciting. It meant the game could continue, could escalate, could become even more entertaining. "Wow," Sophia said, her voice filled with mock admiration. "Look at that. The little mouse has found her voice. How unexpected." Brandon stepped closer to Maya, using his height and build to intimidate her. "I think you might be confused about how things work around here. See, we're the ones who decide what happens, not you. So why don't you sit back down and finish your lunch like a good little girl? Maya didn't move. She stood her ground, her feet planted in the stance that Master Kim had taught her, her breathing controlled and steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. She had spent years learning to find her center, to remain calm in the face of provocation, and she drew on that training now. "I'm not going to ask again," Maya said, her voice quiet but carrying a note of steel that none of them had heard before. "Give me back my bottle." Jake laughed and held the bottle higher. "You know what? I think I'm going to keep this. Consider it payment for all the entertainment you've provided today." That was when Maya made her decision. She had tried to handle this peacefully, had tried to appeal to whatever decency they might possess, had tried to solve the problem without resorting to the skills that Master Kim had taught her. But they had left her no choice. They had taken something that belonged to her, something that connected her to the person she had loved most in the world, and they had no intention of giving it back. Maya's training had taught her that violence should always be a last resort, that the greatest victory was the one achieved without fighting. But it had also taught her that some things were worth fighting for, that there came a time when standing up for yourself wasn't just a choice but a responsibility. As she looked at Jake holding her grandmother's bottle, as she saw the cruel satisfaction in his eyes and the eager anticipation in the faces of his friends, Maya felt the invisible chains that had bound her for so long begin to crack. She was tired of being small, tired of being ignored, tired of allowing others to determine her worth and her place in the world. The quiet girl who had spent years hiding in the shadows was about to step into the light, and nothing at Riverside High would ever be the same. Part 2. The awakening, the transformation, began in Maya's eyes. Jake noticed it first, the way her hazel gaze shifted from pleading to something else entirely, something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. It was the look of a predator that had been cornered too long, and he suddenly realized that maybe they had misjudged their target. "Last warning," Maya said, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to come from somewhere deep within her core. The words were soft, almost whispered, but they cut through the cafeteria noise like a blade. Jake's grip tightened on the water bottle, his knuckles white against the faded floral pattern. "You're not in a position to make threats, Chen. In case you haven't noticed, you're outnumbered." "Numbers don't matter," Maya replied, and there was something in her tone that made several nearby students stop their conversations and turn to watch. "Not when you're fighting for something that truly matters." Sophia stepped forward, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against the cafeteria table. "Oh, please. What are you going to do? Cry harder? Maybe write a sad little poem about your feelings?" The mockery in her voice was designed to wound, but Maya felt something entirely different than the shame and humiliation she had experienced just moments before. Instead, she felt a calm settling over her, the kind of focused clarity that Master Kim had taught her to find in the midst of chaos. Her breathing slowed, her stance shifted almost imperceptibly, and her hands relaxed at her sides. "I'm going to give you one more chance to do the right thing," Maya said. "After that, I won't be responsible for what happens." Brandon laughed, the sound harsh and dismissive. "Listen to her. She actually thinks she's intimidating us. This is rich." He looked around at the growing crowd of students who had gathered to watch the confrontation. "Hey everyone, check this out. Maya Chen thinks she's tough now." The attention of the cafeteria was now fully focused on their corner, and Maya could feel the weight of dozens of eyes watching her every move. For years, this kind of scrutiny would have sent her running, would have made her shrink back into herself and accept whatever humiliation was being offered. But something fundamental had changed in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Emma pulled out her phone and began recording, her face lit up with the kind of malicious glee that came from witnessing someone's destruction. "This is going to be epic," the quiet girl finally snaps. "I can't wait to see how this ends." Jake raised the water bottle higher, tilting it so that the remaining tea began to drip onto the floor. "You know what? I think I'm done with this conversation. Maybe it's time for your precious bottle to take a little trip." He drew back his arm as if to throw the bottle across the cafeteria, and that was when Maya moved. The transformation was instantaneous and breathtaking. One moment she was standing still, seemingly helpless against the four students who had cornered her, and the next she was flowing through space with a grace and power that left the watching crowd gasping in amazement. Her movement was so fluid, so perfectly controlled, that it seemed almost supernatural. Maya's first step carried her forward and to the side, moving her out of Brandon's reach before he could react. Her second step brought her within striking distance of Jake, and her hand shot out in a precise motion that targeted the pressure point just below his wrist. The technique was called Crane's Beak in TAEKWONDO, and Master Kim had taught her to use it to disarm opponents without causing permanent damage. Jake's hand went numb instantly, and the water bottle slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers. Maya caught it before it could hit the ground, her reflexes honed by years of training allowing her to snatch it out of the air with casual ease. The entire sequence had taken less than 3 seconds, and Jake was still trying to process what had happened when Maya stepped back, the bottle safely in her possession. What the hell? Jake stared at his hand, flexing his fingers as feeling slowly returned to them. How did you— 6 years of training, Maya said simply, screwing the cap back onto her grandmother's bottle. 3 times a week. Every week, since I was 10 years old. The crowd around them had fallen silent, and Maya could feel the shift in the room's energy. The students who had been expecting to witness her humiliation were now seeing something entirely different. A demonstration of skill and control that none of them had imagined possible from the quiet girl who sat in the corner. Sophia's face had gone pale, and her voice was higher than usual when she spoke. You can't just attack people like that. That's assault. Maya's smile was cold and humorless. I disarmed someone who was threatening to destroy my property. In any court of law, that would be considered self-defense. She paused, letting the words sink in. Besides, I was very careful not to cause any permanent damage. Jake's hand will be fine in a few minutes. Brandon stepped forward, his charm replaced by something uglier. You think you're clever, don't you? But you just made a huge mistake. You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. I know exactly what I've gotten myself into, Maya replied, her voice steady and calm. The question is whether you do. Emma was still recording, her phone trembling in her hands. This is insane. She's like some kind of ninja or something. Not a ninja, Maya corrected. A martial artist. There's a difference. Ninjas were assassins. I studied Taekwondo, which is about discipline, respect, and protecting yourself and others. Jake had finally recovered enough to speak, though his voice was shaky with a combination of pain and confusion. You can't just go around attacking people. There are rules here. You're right, Maya agreed. There are rules, and you broke them first when you took something that didn't belong to you. She held up the water bottle, the fluorescent lights catching the dents and scratches that spoke of years of careful use. This belonged to my grandmother. It's one of the few things I have left of her, and you were going to destroy it for your own entertainment. The weight of her words seemed to settle over the group, and for a moment, Maya saw something that might have been shame flicker across Sophia's features, but it was quickly replaced by defiance. So what if it was your grandmother's? It's still just a water bottle. You're acting like we were trying to steal the crown jewels or something. Maya's eyes flashed with an anger that was all the more powerful for being carefully controlled. Just a water bottle? This bottle traveled with my grandmother from Taiwan to America when she was younger than I am now. She carried it through poverty, through discrimination, through the hardest years of her life. It held water when she worked in the fields, tea when she celebrated small victories, and medicine when she was sick and couldn't afford a doctor. The cafeteria was completely silent now, and Maya could feel every person in the room hanging on her words. For the first time in her life, she had their complete attention, and she was going to use it. My grandmother gave this to me 3 years ago, right before she died. Maya continued, her voice carrying clearly across the space. She told me that it would remind me that strength doesn't come from being the loudest or the most popular or the most cruel. It comes from knowing who you are and standing up for what matters even when you're afraid. She took a step closer to the group, and Maya was surprised to see Brandon actually take a step back. You took this from me because you thought I was weak. Because you thought I wouldn't fight back. Because you've spent so long being bullies that you forgot other people have feelings and dignity and things that matter to them. Emma's phone was still recording, but her expression had changed. The malicious excitement had been replaced by something that looked almost like regret. You want to know what I think? Maya asked, her voice carrying a quiet intensity that made everyone lean forward to hear her. I think you're the weak ones. I think you pick on people like me because you're afraid of what would happen if you had to face someone who could actually fight back. I think you're so insecure about your own worth that you have to tear other people down to feel better about yourselves. Sophia's face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. You don't know anything about us. You don't know what our lives are like. You're right, Maya agreed. I don't know what your lives are like, but I know what mine is like. I know what it feels like to lose someone you love. I know what it feels like to work for everything you have. And I know what it feels like to be treated like you don't matter. She looked around at the watching crowd, and Maya realized that she wasn't just talking to her 4 tormentors anymore. She was talking to everyone who had ever been made to feel small. Everyone who had ever been told that their feelings didn't matter. Everyone who had ever been bullied by people who thought their popularity gave them the right to hurt others. I've spent 3 years being invisible in this school, Maya said, her voice growing stronger with each word. I've sat in the corner, kept my head down, and tried not to bother anyone. I thought that if I was quiet enough, small enough, unnoticed enough, I could just get through high school without any trouble. Jake was flexing his hand, the feeling having returned but his confidence still shaken. Maybe you should have kept your head down. Maybe you should have stayed invisible. Maya's smile was sharp and dangerous. Maybe. But you know what I learned today? Being invisible doesn't protect you from cruel people. It just makes you an easier target, and I'm tired of being an easy target. Brandon tried to reassert his authority, his voice taking on the commanding tone that had always worked for him in the past. Look, this has gone far enough. You got your bottle back, you made your point, now just sit down and shut up before things get worse for you. Worse for me? Maya laughed, and there was no humor in the sound. What exactly are you going to do to me, Brandon? Are you going to try to intimidate me? Are you going to spread rumors about me? Are you going to try to turn people against me? She gestured around the cafeteria, where dozens of students were watching the confrontation with rapt attention. Take a look around. Everyone here just watched you and your friends try to destroy something that meant everything to me. Just because you could. They watched you mock my family, my heritage, and my feelings. And they watched me stand up for myself with more skill and control than any of you have ever shown. Emma lowered her phone, her face pale. We weren't trying to hurt you. We were just having fun. Fun? Maya's voice was incredulous. You call humiliating someone fun? You call destroying something precious fun? You call making someone feel worthless fun? She shook her head, and Maya could see that several students in the crowd were nodding in agreement with her words. That's not fun. That's cruelty. And the fact that you can't tell the difference is exactly the problem. Sophia tried one more time to regain control of the situation. You're being dramatic. It's just a stupid water bottle. You're acting like we committed some kind of crime. You're right, Maya said, her voice deadly calm. It is just a water bottle. Just like I'm just a quiet girl who likes to read. Just like the other students you've bullied over the years are just people trying to get through high school. But just doesn't mean worthless. Just doesn't mean you have the right to hurt someone. She took another step forward, and this time all 4 of them stepped back. Maya could feel the power radiating from her stance, the confidence that came from years of training, and the knowledge that she was finally, truly, standing up for herself. I want you to understand something, Maya said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent cafeteria. This ends now. You don't get to treat me like I'm invisible anymore. You don't get to take my things, mock my family, or make me feel ashamed of who I am. And if you try, you'll discover that I'm not the helpless victim you thought I was. Jake's voice was shaky when he spoke. Are you threatening us? I'm making you a promise, Maya replied. I'm promising that I will never again allow anyone to treat me the way you treated me today. I'm promising that I will stand up for myself and for anyone else who needs someone to stand up for them. And I'm promising that if you mistake my kindness for weakness again, you'll learn exactly what 6 years of martial arts training can accomplish. The threat hung in the air, like a living thing, and Maya could see the fear in their eyes. For the first time in their lives, they were facing someone who wasn't afraid of them, someone who had the skill and the will to fight back, someone who had turned their own weapon of humiliation against them. Brandon tried to salvage his reputation, his voice taking on a dismissive tone that fooled no one. "Whatever. You're not worth the trouble. Come on, guys, let's get out of here." But before they could move, Maya spoke again. "Actually, I think you owe me an apology." The words stopped them cold, and Sophia turned back with an expression of disbelief. "Excuse me? You heard me," Maya said, her voice calm and implacable. "You took something that belonged to me. You tried to destroy it. You mocked my family and my heritage. You humiliated me in front of the entire school. And you did it all because you thought I was too weak to stop you." She looked around at the watching crowd, and Maya realized that she had their complete support. Students who had never spoken to her were nodding in agreement, their faces showing a mix of admiration and amazement at her transformation. "I want you to apologize," Maya continued. "Not because I need your apology, but because everyone here needs to see that actions have consequences. They need to see that bullying isn't acceptable, that cruelty isn't funny, and that even the quietest person has limits." Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "We're not going to apologize." "Then you're going to have a problem," Maya said simply. "Because I'm not going away. I'm not going to be invisible anymore. And every time you try to hurt someone, every time you decide that your entertainment is more important than someone else's dignity, I'm going to be there to stop you." The promise was made with such quiet certainty that no one in the cafeteria doubted that she meant every word. Maya had transformed from victim to protector in the space of a few minutes, and the change was so complete that it left everyone stunned. Jake tried to laugh, but the sound came out forced and hollow. "You can't police the entire school. You can't be everywhere at once." "I don't need to be everywhere at once," Maya replied. "I just need to be here, right now, making it clear that the old rules don't apply anymore. That the time when people like you could hurt people like me without consequences is over." She held up her grandmother's water bottle, and the gesture somehow carried more weight than any speech could have. This bottle has survived poverty, discrimination, war, and loss. It's traveled thousands of miles and lasted for decades. And today, it taught me something important. Maya paused, letting the silence stretch until everyone in the cafeteria was hanging on her next words. "It taught me that some things are worth fighting for. That strength isn't about being the biggest or the loudest or the most popular. It's about knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone make you feel ashamed of it." She looked directly at each of her 4 tormentors, and Maya could see that her words had hit their mark. They had expected an easy victory, a quick moment of entertainment at the expense of someone they saw as beneath them. Instead, they had awakened something in Maya that none of them were prepared to face. "So here's what's going to happen," Maya said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had finally found her power. "You're going to leave me alone. You're going to stop targeting other students who can't defend themselves. And you're going to think very carefully about whether the temporary pleasure of making someone feel small is worth the permanent consequences of revealing who you really are." Brandon's face was red with anger and humiliation. "You think you've won something here. You think this changes anything. We still run this school. We still decide who matters and who doesn't." Maya's smile was sad but determined. "No, Brandon, you don't get to decide who matters. You never did. You just convinced people that you did, and they believed you because it was easier than fighting back. But I'm done believing that lie. And I think a lot of other people are too." She looked around the cafeteria, and Maya could see the truth of her words reflected in the faces of the students watching them. Something had shifted in the room, some fundamental understanding about power and fear and the courage to stand up for what was right. "The old Maya would have sat quietly while you took her bottle and destroyed it," Maya continued. "She would have cried alone in the bathroom and spent the rest of high school trying to be even more invisible. But that Maya is gone. The person standing here now is someone who knows her worth, who won't be intimidated, and who will fight for what matters. Emma's phone was still in her hands, but she seemed to have forgotten about recording. This is crazy. You're just one person. You can't change everything. You're right, Maya agreed. I can't change everything. But I can change this. I can change how I respond to people like you. I can change how I think about myself. And maybe, if I'm very lucky, I can change how other people think about standing up for themselves. She took a step back, her posture relaxing slightly, but her eyes still alert and watchful. The choice is yours. You can learn from this experience, you can grow from it, you can become better people. Or you can continue to be exactly who you've always been. But if you choose the second option, you'll discover that the world has changed around you, and you're not prepared for what that means. The four students looked at each other, and Maya could see the uncertainty in their eyes. For the first time in their lives, they were facing someone who wasn't afraid of them. Someone who had the skills and the will to fight back. Someone who had turned their own tactics against them with devastating effectiveness. Sophia was the first to speak, her voice small and uncertain. This isn't over. You're right, Maya agreed. It's not over, it's just beginning. But the next move is yours. Choose wisely. With that, Maya turned and walked back to her table, her grandmother's water bottle clutched safely in her hand. The crowd parted before her, and she could feel the weight of their attention, but it felt different now. Instead of the crushing scrutiny that had always made her want to disappear, this felt like recognition, like respect, like the acknowledgement that she had finally found her voice. As she sat down and picked up her book, Maya could feel the energy in the cafeteria slowly returning to normal. Conversations resumed, though they were quieter and more subdued than before. Students kept glancing in her direction, but their expressions were filled with curiosity and admiration rather than pity or dismissal. Brandon, Sophia, Jake, and Emma stood frozen for a moment longer, uncertain how to respond to a situation that had spun completely out of their control. Finally, they began to move toward the exit, their usual confident swagger replaced by something that looked suspiciously like retreat. As they reached the cafeteria doors, Maya called out one final time. Remember what I told you about consequences. They have a way of catching up with people who think they're above them. The four students paused at the threshold, and Maya could see the recognition in their eyes. They understood that something fundamental had changed, that the balance of power they had taken for granted was no longer guaranteed, and that the quiet girl they had tried to destroy had become something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Maya opened her book and began to read, but her mind was racing with the implications of what had just happened. She had crossed a line that she could never uncross, had revealed abilities that she could never hide again, and had made enemies who would not forget what she had done to them. But she had also discovered something about herself that she had never fully understood before. She was not weak, she was not worthless, she was not invisible. She was Maya Chen, granddaughter of warriors, student of martial arts, and protector of those who needed protection. The water bottle sat on the table beside her book, its faded floral pattern somehow seeming brighter in the fluorescent light of the cafeteria. Maya ran her fingers over its surface, feeling the connection to her grandmother's strength and wisdom, and she smiled. The quiet girl was gone. In her place stood someone who would never again allow herself to be made small. Someone who would fight for what mattered. Someone who understood that true strength came not from hurting others but from protecting them. And tomorrow, when the sun rose on Riverside High School, everyone would know that Maya Chen was no longer invisible. The video went viral within 2 hours. Emma had uploaded it to her social media accounts before she fully understood what she had captured, and, by the time she realized her mistake, it was too late to take it back. The footage of Maya's transformation spread through the school's digital networks like wildfire, then jumped to neighboring schools, and finally exploded across multiple platforms, where millions of viewers watched the quiet girl become a warrior. Maya discovered her newfound fame when her phone began buzzing incessantly during her afternoon chemistry class. Mr. Peterson had to ask her twice to put the device away, and when she finally checked it after class, she found hundreds of notifications from social media platforms she barely used. Friend requests, direct messages, and comments flooded her accounts from people she had never met, all praising her courage and asking for details about her martial arts background. The hallways of Riverside High had transformed into something Maya barely recognized. Students who had never acknowledged her existence now stepped aside as she passed, their expressions ranging from curious respect to outright awe. Some whispered her name as she walked by, others pulled out their phones to record her movements, and a few brave souls actually approached her to express their admiration for what she had done. "Maya, wait up!" The voice belonged to Sarah Martinez, a sophomore who had been one of Sophia's frequent targets. Maya turned to see the younger girl jogging to catch up with her, her face bright with excitement and hope. "I just wanted to say thank you," Sarah said breathlessly. "What you did in the cafeteria today, it was incredible. I've never seen anyone stand up to them like that." Maya felt a flush of embarrassment at the attention. "I just did what anyone would have done. They took something that belonged to me." "No," Sarah shook her head emphatically. "That's not true. Most people would have just let them take it. They would have been too scared to fight back. But you weren't scared. You were amazing." Other students had gathered around them, drawn by the conversation and the chance to get closer to the girl who had become the school's most talked-about person overnight. Maya found herself surrounded by faces she recognized but had never really interacted with, all looking at her with a mixture of curiosity and admiration that made her deeply uncomfortable. "How long have you been doing martial arts?" asked David Kim, a junior from her calculus class. "That move you did, the way you disarmed Jake, it was like something out of a movie." 6 years, Maya replied quietly, clutching her backpack straps and wishing she could disappear into the crowd rather than being the center of it. "I train at Master Kim's academy downtown." "Master Kim?" David's eyes widened with recognition. "My uncle went to school with him back in Korea. He said Master Kim was one of the best fighters he ever saw." "No wonder you're so skilled." The conversation continued to flow around Maya, with students sharing their own stories of being bullied by Brandon's group and expressing their amazement at seeing someone finally stand up to them. Maya listened with growing unease, realizing that her moment of defiance had created expectations she wasn't sure she could meet. "So what happens now?" asked Lisa Chen, a freshman who shared Maya's last name but no relation. "Are you going to teach them a lesson? Are you going to make them pay for everything they've done to people?" Maya felt the weight of dozens of eyes on her, all waiting for her answer. She could see the hope in their faces, the desire for justice that had been building up over years of watching Brandon's group terrorize anyone they saw as beneath them. But she could also see something else in their expressions, something that made her stomach twist with anxiety. They were looking at her like she was their savior, their protector, their solution to a problem that had plagued the school for years. They wanted her to be the warrior who would fight their battles, the hero who would make everything right. And Maya realized with growing panic that she had no idea how to be any of those things. "I didn't do what I did to start a war," Maya said carefully. "I just wanted my bottle back. I wanted them to understand that they couldn't treat me like I didn't matter." "But you can't stop there," Sarah insisted. "You have to know that they're going to come after you now. They're going to try to get revenge. You have to be ready to fight back." Maya's chest tightened with anxiety. She had been so focused on the immediate confrontation that she hadn't fully considered the long-term consequences of her actions. Brandon and his friends weren't the type of people who would simply accept defeat and move on. They would regroup, they would plan, and they would find a way to strike back when she least expected it. "Maybe you should teach us," suggested Marcus Williams, the quiet boy who had been one of Jake's favorite targets on the wrestling team. "Maybe you could show us how to defend ourselves so we don't have to be afraid anymore." The suggestion was taken up by several other students, and Maya found herself facing a chorus of eager voices, all asking her to share her knowledge, to train them, to turn them into fighters who could stand up to their tormentors. The responsibility they were trying to place on her shoulders felt overwhelming, and Maya took a step back from the group. "I can't do that," she said, her voice barely audible over the excited chatter. "I'm not a teacher. I'm just a student, like all of you." "But you're different now," David pointed out. "You're not invisible anymore. Everyone knows who you are. Everyone knows what you can do. You have power now. Real power. You can't just pretend that nothing has changed." Maya felt a chill run down her spine as she realized the truth in his words. There was no going back to her quiet corner table, no returning to the safety of invisibility, no escape from the attention that now followed her wherever she went. She had crossed a threshold, and there was no way to uncross it. The bell rang, signaling the end of the lunch period, and the crowd of students began to disperse toward their afternoon classes. But as they walked away, Maya could hear them continuing to discuss what had happened, making plans for how they could support her, speculating about what Brandon's group would do next. Maya made her way to her locker, her mind racing with the implications of what her life had become in the space of a single lunch period. She had wanted to stand up for herself, to reclaim her dignity and protect something precious to her. But in doing so, she had become something she had never intended to be. A symbol, a leader, a focal point for all the anger and frustration that had been building up in the school's overlooked and oppressed students. As she gathered her books for her next class, Maya became aware of someone standing behind her. She turned to find Master Kim's nephew, Danny, a senior she had occasionally seen at the academy but had never spoken to at school. "I heard about what happened," Danny said quietly, his voice pitched low enough that passing students couldn't overhear. "My uncle is going to want to talk to you." Maya's heart sank. Master Kim had been very clear about the responsibility that came with martial arts training, about the importance of using their skills only when absolutely necessary, and never for aggression or revenge. She had acted in self-defense, but she wondered if her teacher would see it that way. "Am I in trouble?" Maya asked, closing her locker with trembling hands. Danny's expression was thoughtful. "Uncle Kim doesn't believe in trouble, only in learning. But he does believe that when you reveal your training to the world, you become responsible for how that knowledge is used. He's going to want to make sure you understand what that means." Maya nodded, her anxiety deepening. She had spent so many years keeping her two worlds separate, never allowing her school life to intersect with her training. Now that barrier had been shattered, and she wasn't sure how to navigate the consequences. "There's something else," Danny continued, glancing around to make sure they weren't being overheard. "Word is already spreading to other schools. People are talking about the girl from Riverside who stood up to the bullies. Some of them are impressed. Others are taking it as a challenge." Maya felt her blood turn cold. "What do you mean?" "I mean, there are people out there who see what you did as disrespectful, as someone who thinks they're better than everyone else because they know how to fight. There are students from other schools who are talking about coming here to test you, to see if you're as tough as the video makes you look." The weight of what Danny was telling her settled over Maya like a suffocating blanket. Not only did she have to worry about Brandon's group plotting their revenge, but now she had potentially attracted the attention of strangers who saw her as a target to be tested or a reputation to be destroyed. "I never wanted any of this," Maya whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I just wanted them to give me back my bottle." Danny's expression softened with sympathy. "I know, but Uncle Kim always says that the moment you use your training, you stop being just a student and become a representative of everything you've learned. Your actions reflect on him, on the academy, on the art itself. That's a heavy responsibility." Maya felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away. She had cried enough for one day, and she couldn't afford to show weakness now when so many people were watching her every move. "What am I supposed to do?" Maya asked, her voice small and uncertain. "Come to the academy tonight," Danny suggested. "Talk to Uncle Kim. He'll help you figure out how to handle this situation with honor and wisdom." "And Maya?" He paused, his expression serious. "Be careful at school tomorrow. The video has been shared thousands of times already, and not everyone who sees it is going to be sympathetic to your cause." With that warning, Danny walked away, leaving Maya standing alone by her locker, with her mind spinning from everything she had learned. The hallway around her was filled with the usual chaos of students rushing to their next classes, but Maya felt disconnected from it all, as if she were watching the world through a thick sheet of glass. She made her way to her afternoon English class, but found it impossible to concentrate on the discussion of character motivation in their current novel. Her mind kept returning to the events in the cafeteria, to the feeling of power that had flowed through her when she disarmed Jake, to the moment when she had finally found her voice and spoken truth to the people who had tried to silence her. But now that initial rush of triumph was fading, replaced by a growing sense of dread about what was to come. Maya had always been a planner, someone who thought through the consequences of her actions before taking them. But her confrontation with Brandon's group had been pure instinct, a moment when years of suppressed anger and frustration had finally found an outlet. Mrs. Rodriguez called on her twice during the class discussion, but Maya's responses were distracted and incomplete. She could see the concern in her teacher's eyes, the recognition that something significant had changed in her usually focused student. Other students kept glancing in her direction, their expressions ranging from admiration to curiosity to something that might have been fear. When the final bell rang, Maya gathered her things and headed for the exit, hoping to slip away quietly and avoid any more confrontations or conversations about her newfound notoriety. But as she stepped out of the building, she found her path blocked by a group of students she didn't recognize. "You Maya Chen?" The speaker was a tall boy with muscular arms covered in tattoos, his voice carrying an edge that made Maya's instincts flare with warning. "The one from the video?" Maya's training kicked in automatically, her posture shifting to a more balanced stance, while her hands remained relaxed at her sides. "Who's asking?" "Name's Rico," the boy said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I go to Lincoln High. Me and my friends here saw your little performance online, and we wanted to meet the famous warrior princess." The other boys with him laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Maya counted 6 of them, all older and larger than she was, all carrying themselves with the confidence of people who were used to intimidating others through size and aggression. "I'm not looking for any trouble," Maya said carefully, her eyes scanning the group for signs of weapons or coordinated positioning. "I just want to go home." "Oh, we're not here to cause trouble," Rico said, his tone mocking. "We're just curious about this girl who thinks she's some kind of kung fu master. See where we come from. People who want to talk tough better be ready to back it up." Maya could feel the attention of other Riverside students focusing on the confrontation, could see phones being pulled out to record what was happening. The crowd that had gathered around her earlier in the day was reforming, but this time their expressions were filled with anxiety rather than admiration. "I never claimed to be a master of anything," Maya replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "I just defended myself against people who were trying to hurt me." "Yeah, we saw that," Rico said, taking a step closer. "Very impressive. But disarming some preppy kid isn't the same as facing real fighters. We wanted to see if you're as tough as you pretend to be." Maya felt her heart rate increase, but her breathing remained controlled. Master Kim had taught her to recognize when a situation was escalating beyond the possibility of peaceful resolution, and every instinct she had was telling her that these boys had come here looking for a fight. "I don't want to fight you," Maya said, her voice carrying the authority she had discovered in the cafeteria. "But if you force me to defend myself, you're not going to like the outcome." Rico's eyes narrowed, and Maya could see that her words had struck a nerve. "You threatening us, little girl? Because if you are, you just made a big mistake." "I'm promising you," Maya replied, echoing the words she had used with Brandon's group. "I'm promising that if you attack me, I will defend myself with everything I've learned." And I've learned quite a lot. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut, and Maya could see that the confrontation was reaching a tipping point. Rico's friends were spreading out in a rough circle around her, cutting off her escape routes and preparing for what they expected to be an easy victory over a girl who had gotten too confident for her own good. But Maya was no longer the same person who had sat quietly in the corner of the cafeteria that morning. The events of the day had awakened something in her that had been sleeping for too long, and she was beginning to understand that sometimes the only way to achieve peace was to be prepared for war. "Last chance," Rico said, his hands curling into fists. "Apologize for showing off, admit that you're just a scared little girl playing pretend, and we'll let you walk away." Maya's grip tightened on her backpack straps, and she felt the familiar calm that came over her before sparring sessions at the academy. "I have nothing to apologize for. I stood up for myself against bullies, and I'll do it again if I have to." Rico's smile turned predatory. Wrong answer. The attack came from 3 directions at once, a coordinated assault designed to overwhelm her through sheer numbers and aggression. But Maya had been training for situations exactly like this, had spent years learning to face multiple opponents and use their own momentum against them. She dropped her backpack and moved, her body flowing into the defensive patterns that had become as natural as breathing. The first attacker reached her a split second before the others, and Maya used that timing to her advantage. redirecting his charge into a hip throw that sent him sprawling across the sidewalk. The second attacker tried to grab her from behind, but Maya had anticipated the move and spun away from his grasp, her elbow striking upward to catch him in the solar plexus. He doubled over, gasping for breath, and Maya continued her rotation to face the third attacker. This one was more cautious, having seen what happened to his friends, and he approached with his hands up in a boxer's stance. Maya recognized the style and adjusted her strategy accordingly, using her superior speed and flexibility to stay outside his range while looking for an opening. The opening came when he overcommitted to a right cross, leaving his left side exposed. Maya stepped in with a precise side kick to his ribs, and the boy staggered backward, his face pale with pain and surprise. Rico and his remaining friends stood frozen, their eyes wide with disbelief as they watched their confident assault crumble in the face of Maya's superior training and technique. The entire fight had lasted less than 30 seconds, and 3 of their number were down while Maya remained standing, her breathing only slightly elevated. "Anyone else?" Maya asked, her voice calm and controlled despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "Or, are we done here?" Rico's face was flushed with anger and humiliation. "This isn't over, Chen. Word is going to spread about what happened here. You won't be able to hide behind your reputation forever." "I'm not hiding behind anything," Maya replied. "I'm standing right here, ready to face whatever comes next. The question is whether you're smart enough to walk away while you still can." The threat hung in the air between them, and Maya could see Rico weighing his options. He had come here expecting an easy victory, a chance to embarrass the girl who had gotten too much attention. Instead, he had been thoroughly outclassed by someone half his size, and his reputation among his friends was now in tatters. Finally, Rico gestured to his companions, and they began to help their injured friends to their feet. "This isn't finished," he said as they prepared to leave. "You made us look bad, and that's not something we forget." "Neither is defending myself," Maya replied. "Remember that?" As the Lincoln High students limped away, Maya became aware of the crowd that had gathered to watch the fight. Riverside students surrounded her, their faces showing a mixture of awe, fear, and excitement that made her stomach churn with anxiety. "That was incredible," breathed Sarah Martinez. "You took down 3 guys like it was nothing." "It wasn't nothing," Maya said firmly, picking up her backpack with shaking hands. Fighting should never be taken lightly. Someone could have been seriously hurt. But her words were lost in the excited chatter of students who had just witnessed something they would be talking about for years to come. Maya realized with growing horror that the video of this second confrontation would soon be joining the first one online, spreading her face and her story to an even wider audience. She had wanted to protect herself and reclaim her dignity. Instead, she had become exactly what she had never wanted to be, the center of attention, a target for anyone looking to test themselves against the famous warrior girl from Riverside High. As Maya walked toward the bus stop, her phone buzzing with notifications and her mind racing with the implications of what had just happened, she realized that her quiet life was truly over. There would be no going back to invisibility, no return to the safety of being unnoticed. She was Maya Chen now, the girl who had stood up to the bullies and won. And whether she wanted it or not, that identity came with responsibilities and dangers she was only beginning to understand. Master Kim's academy was a sanctuary of polished wood floors and ancient wisdom, where the scent of incense mingled with the sharp sound of feet striking heavy bags. Maya arrived that evening to find her elderly teacher waiting for her in the main training hall, his weathered hands folded behind his back as he gazed out the window at the setting sun. "Maya, he said without turning around, using the Korean honorific that had always made her feel like family rather than just another student. "I have been expecting you." Maya bowed deeply, the formal gesture feeling more necessary than ever after the chaos of her day. "Master Kim, I need to tell you what happened at school today." "I already know," he replied, finally turning to face her with eyes that held no judgment, only deep concern. "My nephew Danny told me about the incidents. Both of them." Maya felt her shoulders sag with the weight of disappointment she was sure her teacher must be feeling. "I'm sorry, Master Kim. I know you taught me that martial arts should only be used as a last resort, but I couldn't let them destroy my grandmother's bottle. And then those boys from Lincoln High, they came looking for a fight. Master Kim studied her face for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Tell me, Maya, do you believe you acted with honor?" The question caught Maya off guard. She had expected a lecture about responsibility, about the dangers of using her training outside the controlled environment of the academy. Instead, her teacher was asking her to examine her own conscience. "I think so," Maya said slowly. "I tried to resolve both situations peacefully first. I only fought when they left me no choice." "And how do you feel about the outcome?" Maya considered the question carefully. "Relieved that I could protect something precious to me. Proud that I finally stood up for myself. But also scared about what comes next." Master Kim nodded approvingly. "Fear is wisdom when it comes from understanding consequences rather than cowardice. You have learned something important today about the weight that comes with strength." He gestured for Maya to sit beside him on the raised platform where he often shared lessons about the philosophy behind their physical training. "Do you know why I agreed to teach you when your grandmother brought you to me 6 years ago?" Maya shook her head. She had always wondered why Master Kim had taken on a shy 10-year-old when his academy was known for training serious adult martial artists. "Because she told me you had the heart of a protector but the spirit of a scholar," Master Kim explained. "She said you would need to learn how to be strong not for yourself, but for others who could not be strong. Today, you proved her wisdom." Maya felt tears spring to her eyes at the mention of her grandmother. "But Master Kim, I don't know how to be what everyone wants me to be. They're looking at me like I'm supposed to solve all their problems, like I'm some kind of hero. I'm just a 16-year-old girl who wants to graduate and go to college." Master Kim's smile was gentle but knowing. "Heroes are often just ordinary people who find themselves in extraordinary circumstances. The question is not whether you asked for this responsibility, but how you will handle it now that it is yours." They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the last rays of sunlight filter through the windows. Finally, Master Kim spoke again. "There is something else you need to know. Your actions today have attracted attention beyond what you realize. The videos have spread far beyond your school, far beyond your town. There are people coming to test you, people who see your skill as a challenge to their own reputation." Maya's heart sank. How many people? Enough that avoiding them is no longer an option. But Maya, running from this challenge would not only be futile, it would be dishonorable. You have revealed your strength to the world. Now you must prove that strength comes with wisdom and restraint. Master Kim stood and walked to a cabinet at the far end of the room, returning with a package wrapped in black silk. "Your grandmother asked me to give this to you when I felt you were ready to understand its meaning. After today, I believe that time has come." Maya unwrapped the silk with trembling hands, revealing a beautifully crafted wooden box inlaid with mother of pearl. Inside, nestled in red velvet, was a small jade pendant carved in the shape of a lotus flower. "This belonged to your great-grandmother," Master Kim explained. "She wore it when she had to defend her family during the war. Your grandmother carried it when she came to America with nothing but courage and determination. Now it is yours, a reminder that strength without compassion is mere brutality, but compassion without strength is helpless." Maya lifted the pendant, feeling the smooth coolness of the jade against her palm. "What am I supposed to do with it?" "Wear it tomorrow when you face what is coming. And remember that the lotus grows most beautiful when it rises from the deepest mud. Your challenges are not obstacles to your growth. They are the very conditions that will help you bloom." The next morning arrived gray and overcast, with clouds that seemed to press down on Riverside High like a heavy blanket. Maya walked through the front doors wearing her grandmother's jade pendant beneath her shirt, its weight against her chest. A constant reminder of the legacy she carried. The hallways were electric with tension and anticipation. Word had spread overnight that students from multiple schools were planning to converge on Riverside to challenge the girl who had become an overnight internet sensation. Teachers moved through the corridors with worried expressions, administrators huddled in urgent conferences, and the student body buzzed with excitement and anxiety about what the day might bring. Maya made her way to her locker, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy despite the whispers and stares that followed her every step. Her usual corner table in the cafeteria had been claimed by a group of students who had appointed themselves her unofficial bodyguards, and everywhere she looked, she saw the faces of classmates who had been transformed overnight, from indifferent strangers to invested observers of her story. Maya! Sarah Martinez appeared at her elbow, her face pale with worry. "You need to see this." She handed Maya her phone, which displayed a social media post from an account called West Coast Warriors. The message was simple but ominous. "Challenge accepted. Riverside High, lunchtime. Let's see if the hype is real." Maya's stomach dropped as she scrolled through the comments beneath the post. Dozens of accounts from different schools had responded with their own challenges and threats, turning what had started as a simple act of self-defense into some kind of martial arts tournament that she had never agreed to participate in. "They're treating this like a game," Maya said, her voice tight with anxiety. "Like I'm some kind of boss fight in a video game that they need to beat to prove themselves." "Maybe you should stay home today," Sarah suggested. "Maybe you should let the administration handle this." Maya considered the option, but she knew it wouldn't solve anything. Running away would only postpone the confrontation, and it would send a message that she could be intimidated into backing down. More importantly, it would leave her fellow students to face whatever consequences arose from her actions. "No," Maya said firmly. "If people want to challenge me, they can do it here, where there are teachers and security cameras and witnesses. I won't let this turn into some kind of street fight where innocent people could get hurt." The morning classes passed in a blur of distracted lessons and worried glances toward the windows. Maya could see unfamiliar cars gathering in the student parking lot, could hear the buzz of excitement and tension building throughout the school. By the time the lunch bell rang, it felt like the entire building was holding its breath. Maya made her way to the cafeteria, her jade pendant warm against her skin, and her training flowing through her muscles like electricity. She had made a decision during her last class, a resolution that felt both terrifying and liberating. She was done being reactive. She was done letting other people set the terms of her life. If the world wanted to see what Maya Chen was really capable of, she would show them, but she would do it on her own terms, with honor and wisdom and the strength that came from knowing who she was and what she stood for. The cafeteria had been transformed into something resembling a coliseum. Students from Riverside High lined the walls, their faces tense with anticipation. In the center of the room, a group of unfamiliar teenagers waited with the confident bearing of people who had come to prove something. Maya counted at least 8 of them, all older and larger than she was, all carrying themselves like experienced fighters. Standing slightly apart from the group were Brandon, Sophia, Jake, and Emma, their expressions unreadable as they watched the scene unfold. Maya realized with a start that they had probably orchestrated this confrontation, had used their social media influence to attract challengers who would do what they couldn't do themselves. As Maya entered the cafeteria, the room fell silent. Every eye turned toward her, and she felt the weight of their expectations settle on her shoulders like a physical presence. These people weren't just here to watch a fight. They were here to witness something that would become legend, one way or another. Maya Chen? The speaker was a girl with short purple hair and arms covered in martial arts tattoos. "I'm Zoe from West Coast Warriors. We've come to see if you're as good as your videos suggest." Maya walked slowly to the center of the room, her movements deliberate and controlled. She could feel her training guiding her, helping her find the calm center that Master Kim had taught her to access in moments of extreme stress. "I never asked for this challenge," Maya said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent cafeteria. "I defended myself against bullies, and somehow that turned into an invitation for people to test themselves against me. But I'm here now, and I'm ready to face whatever you think you need to prove." Zoe smiled, but there was respect in her expression rather than mockery. "We're not here to hurt you. We're here because you've inspired people, and we want to see if that inspiration is based on real skill or just lucky timing." Maya nodded, understanding the distinction. These weren't the cruel bullies she had faced before. These were serious martial artists who saw her as a peer to be tested, rather than a victim to be destroyed. "Then let's do this properly," Maya said, pulling the jade pendant from beneath her shirt and holding it up so everyone could see it. "This belonged to my great-grandmother who fought to protect her family during the war. It belonged to my grandmother, who carried it when she came to America seeking a better life. Now it belongs to me, and I wear it to remember that strength without honor is meaningless." She clasped the pendant around her neck where everyone could see it, then bowed formally to Zoe and her companions. "I accept your challenge, but I propose different terms. Instead of a fight, let's have a demonstration. I'll show you what I've learned, and you can judge for yourselves whether it's worthy of the attention it's received." Zoe looked surprised, but she nodded respectfully. "What kind of demonstration?" Maya gestured toward the tables and chairs that filled the cafeteria. "I'll navigate through this obstacle course while you and your friends try to stop me from reaching the far wall. No strikes to the head or neck, no moves designed to cause permanent injury. The goal is to demonstrate technique and control, not to hurt each other." The terms were agreed upon quickly, and the watching students pressed back against the walls to create a clear path through the furniture. Maya took her position at one end of the cafeteria, while Zoe and her 7 companions spread out to block her route. As Maya prepared to begin, she felt the presence of her grandmother and great-grandmother with her, their strength flowing through the jade pendant and into her heart. She thought of Master Kim's lessons about the lotus rising from the mud, about finding beauty and growth in the face of adversity. Then she moved, and the world transformed into poetry. Maya flowed through the obstacle course like water, her body adapting to each challenge with grace and precision that left the watching crowd breathless. When Zoe tried to block her path, Maya redirected her momentum with a gentle hip throw that sent the older girl sliding across a table without injury. When 2 of the boys tried to corner her between the lunch counters, Maya used the walls and furniture to launch herself over their heads in a move that belonged more in a martial arts film than a high school cafeteria. Every technique she employed was designed to neutralize rather than harm, to demonstrate rather than dominate. She used joint locks that could have caused serious damage, but instead simply immobilized her opponents long enough for her to continue past them. She employed throws and sweeps that could have sent people crashing to the floor but instead guided them into controlled falls that left them unharmed. By the time Maya reached the far wall, all 8 of her challengers were sitting or lying on the floor, not because they had been defeated but because they had been so thoroughly outclassed that continuing would have been pointless. The entire demonstration had taken less than 3 minutes, but it had showcased a level of skill and control that none of them had expected. The cafeteria erupted in applause, but Maya barely heard it. She was focused on Zoe, who was picking herself up from where Maya had gently deposited her on a pile of gym mats. "That was incredible," Zoe said, her voice filled with genuine admiration. "I've been training for 8 years, and I've never seen anyone move like that. Where did you learn to fight with such precision?" "From someone who taught me that the greatest victory is the one achieved without causing harm," Maya replied, helping Zoe to her feet. "Fighting isn't about proving you're stronger than someone else. It's about protecting what matters and finding peaceful solutions to violent problems." Zoe nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. "You could have hurt any of us, couldn't you? You could have ended this in seconds if you wanted to." Maya's smile was sad but determined. "I could have. But what would that have proven except that I know how to hurt people? The real challenge isn't learning to fight. It's learning when not to fight, and how to win without destroying your opponent." As the crowd began to disperse and the normal rhythm of the lunch period resumed, Maya found herself surrounded by the students from West Coast Warriors. Instead of the defeated challengers she had expected, they looked at her with respect and curiosity. "Would you be willing to train with us sometime?" asked one of the boys who had tried to stop her. "Not to fight, but to learn. You have a perspective on martial arts that I've never encountered before." Maya considered the request, then nodded. "I train at Master Kim's Academy downtown. You're welcome to visit and learn from him. He's the one who taught me that strength and wisdom must go together." As the group from the other school prepared to leave, Zoe approached Maya one last time. "You've changed something today. Not just here in this school, but in all of us. We came here thinking we knew what it meant to be strong, but you've shown us something different." Maya watched them go, then turned to face the Riverside High students who remained in the cafeteria. She could see that something fundamental had shifted in their expressions, that they were looking at her not as a warrior or a protector or a symbol, but as a person who had found a way to stand up for what mattered without losing her compassion or her integrity. Brandon, Sophia, Jake, and Emma approached her slowly, their faces showing a mixture of emotions that Maya couldn't quite read. For a moment, she tensed, preparing for another confrontation. Instead, Brandon spoke quietly. "We owe you an apology. A real one this time. What we did yesterday was wrong, and we've spent all night thinking about why we did it." Sophia nodded, her perfect composure cracked with genuine remorse. "We were jealous, I think. Jealous that you had something that mattered to you so much, something real and meaningful. All we had were our reputations and our status, and those felt empty compared to what you were willing to fight for." Maya studied their faces, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. Instead, she saw something she had never expected to see in their eyes: genuine respect and the beginning of understanding. "I accept your apology," Maya said carefully. "But words are just the beginning. If you really want to make things right, you need to change how you treat people. You need to understand that everyone in this school has something that matters to them, something worth protecting." Jake rubbed his wrist, which still showed faint bruises from Maya's pressure point technique. "You could have really hurt me yesterday. Why didn't you?" "Because hurting you wouldn't have solved anything," Maya replied. "It would have just created more anger, more violence, more pain. I wanted to stop you, not destroy you." Emma looked down at her phone, which still showed the videos that had started everything. "Maybe we should delete these. Maybe this whole thing has gone far enough." Maya shook her head. "Don't delete them. Let people see what happened here today. Let them see that it's possible to stand up for yourself without becoming the thing you're fighting against. Let them see that strength and compassion can exist in the same person." As the lunch period ended and students began to file out of the cafeteria, Maya felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with victory or defeat. She had faced her challenges with honor, had protected what mattered to her, and had discovered that the greatest strength came not from the ability to hurt others, but from the wisdom to know when such ability should be used. The jade pendant rested warm against her chest, and Maya could almost hear her grandmother's voice whispering words of pride and encouragement. She had faced the storm that her moment of courage had created, and she had emerged not as a conqueror, but as someone who understood that true power lay in lifting others up rather than tearing them down. Maya Chen was no longer invisible, but she was also no longer afraid. She had found her voice, her strength, and her purpose. And as she gathered her things and prepared for her afternoon classes, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with the wisdom her grandmother had given her and the training Master Kim had provided. The quiet girl was gone, replaced by someone who understood that silence and strength could coexist, that humility and courage were not opposites but partners, and that the greatest victory was the one that created peace rather than conquest. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.